Tom, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon, Ian.
Nice to have you with us. So, what is this a postponement? Are you seeing it from the Prime Minister? Is this an obliteration of what you thought he stood for?
I think this is exactly what George was telling you just now. This is Isaac Levido saying to the Prime Minister, we've got to drive a wedge against Labour in the same way that his previous boss, Linton Crosby, did in Australia. The thing to remember about that is it didn't work in Australia. It cost the Conservative government there the election. So I think it's a very high-risk strategy for Mr Sunak.
Yeah, and what is that wedge, though? I mean, the wedge is just playing to that part of the electorate that feels strongly about banning things like new diesel and petrol cars.
Well, insofar as...
So the Tories are on the side of motorists and Labour aren't. Yeah. Is it that narrative he wants?
I think it's more that the Tories are on the side of people who've been left behind, and the Labour's for young, and they all live in the north, somewhere north of London, and Labour's are really supported by lots of young, green, urban people who live in the south, and it's an attempt to make that the choice. I think that completely underestimates the British people, frankly. I think the idea that somehow British people who are not having a great time economically, some are willing to give up on the environment and everything else they think is important, on the basis of another flip-flop promise from a government. I think that really underestimates how smart the British people are.
In terms of the overarching target, that hasn't gone away. There is still an aim to get to net zero by 2050. So he's still on the same page in that respect, Tom, but he's not. He's just looking at a different way of getting there. Would that be fair?
I know. And you know, if you want to get somewhere and you start later, it's going to cost you more. So what is the sense in saying we'll save you a bit of money now in order for you to have to pay more later? He doesn't tell you how he's going to get there and what he's going to have to do if we put this off. And remember, at the end of the day, what's determining the rate at which we have to deal with climate change is the physics of carbon in the atmosphere. It's not a sort of choice we have to make about whether we like it or not.
Suella Braverman told us this morning on TalkTV, we're not going to save the planet by bankrupting British people. What do you say to that, Tom?
Well, I'd say that, yes, she's absolutely right about that. Just there isn't any chance of us doing that. Nothing that we're... In fact, it was very interesting. When the Office of Budget Review ran a cost of this, it turned out that it would certainly, we'd have to invest about 1.3 trillion to get there, but we'd save 900 million in the process of getting there. So why on earth do you think that is going to bankrupt the country? It's nonsense.
Do you sense, though, that, I mean, there are arguments that, you know, look, we don't need to go this far, this quickly. We're not going to die. We just have to be sensible. We have to reduce things, and we can't do it in isolation. Our targets were quite ambitious. Somebody a second ago alluded to countries like China and India, even the United States. You know, whatever we do is frankly insignificant unless those guys are on board. So, you know, we were just being a bit too evangelical with the whole thing.
Well, I hear that said. I don't give much credence to it. We used to claim, in one way in which we had a legitimate claim to continue to be a global leader in Britain, was because we were actually decarbonising our economy. By the way, that accelerated the rate at which our economy grew. It didn't slow it down. So I think there's a lot of incomplete stories going on out there about what this will actually do for our economy. If the government was really worried about the bills for all those working people, she was saying this morning she was concerned about, it should have thought about that when it stopped what it called the green crap, and we stopped investing in insulation in people's homes. We went down from 2 million a year to under 50,000 a year of insulating people's homes, which gets your bills right down right now. So I'm a bit suspicious about a government that says it's suddenly worried about doing something about people's bills.
Do you sense, though, that the whole thing, the overarching subject of green issues, let's call it that, do you think it's just been badly sold to the public? Because I think a lot of us look at what is going on. It doesn't. We don't really see politicians that necessarily fully know what they're talking about. We hear them wheel out mantras. They talk about net zero, etc. But then we hear other statistics that actually our levels of polluting in this country are, you know, obviously it could all be we could reduce things as much as we can. But the planet can cope with, certain nasties out there. It can counterbalance things. That's what Mother Nature does. We're not terrible polluters. We have a very small percentage rate of pollution when it comes to carbon. So why is this need to net zero, which is going to be so seismic, clearly very expensive, with, as far as many people are concerned, very little effect on existing on planet Earth, Tom?
Well, as you said, I'm not very sure the politicians who are doing this know what they're talking about, and they clearly don't know what the cost of climate policy failure would be. So they're worrying a bit, and you understand rightly, to worry about the cost of climate policy success, but you've also got to think about what the cost of climate policy failure is. And we saw a little prequel for what that might mean all across the whole of the Mediterranean, where we all go for our summer holidays this summer. That's exactly what climate policy failure means, only a lot more of that. So I think you need to get real leadership from our politicians, and in that sense, you're completely right. That's exactly not what we're getting. They've constantly changed their mind, gone this way and that way, to the point where you now have, it's people in the motor industry, it's people in the energy industry, it's people in the financial community who are saying to this government, you're getting it wrong, and the government isn't listening.